David Cameron, welcome to the Politics Show. We heard a clip in the news there recorded before Gordon Brown gave that interview. He says that all MPs' expenses will have to be scrutinised going back over 4 years. Has this got all party support? Has he been in touch with you about these proposals?
Yes, the going back over 4 years does have all party support, but there is a problem with what he's proposing, and what the House of Commons is doing is, of course, they're going back over 4 years and asking, was it within the rules at the time? And we all know the rules at the time weren't any good. So actually what my scrutiny panel is doing for Conservative MPs is actually going back and asking, you know, what was reasonable and what was right, which I think is a tougher test, and that's what we're doing. So I don't put much faith in the 4-year look back, but we support it. It may come up with some good things.
Will you be going before your own scrutiny panel?
Of course, and the scrutiny panel looks at every single Conservative MP.
Because, of course, there's been the story in today's Mail on Sunday questioning your own mortgage arrangements, that you had £75,000, that you paid off your own mortgage on your principal residence. You could have put that into your constituency home where you maxed out the mortgage.
Well, I think what I did was very reasonable, which is that I bought a house in my constituency in 2001 at the time of the election. I claimed the mortgage interest on that house. I was actually paying out more in mortgage interest than I was claiming, but yes, I was claiming a large amount. And over a time, I've managed to pay down some of that mortgage, and I'm now claiming, as well as the mortgage interest, for some very basic bills like council tax, electricity and heating and the rest of it. So I don't think what is being said, that somehow I could have reduced the claim on the taxpayer, I don't think that's right.
Well, the taxpayer is down. They must be. If you could have used that £75,000 to reduce the mortgage on your second home, then you would have been claiming less on the additional cost allowance, and the taxpayer would have been paying less.
That's not right for two reasons. First, because I was actually paying out more in interest for my mortgage than I was claiming from the taxpayer. And second, when I did pay down the mortgage, I was then able to claim for some very basic and standard bills, things like heating and lighting and water. I've always taken the view that the best thing to claim for are those reasonable expenses that are about having a second home, so either mortgage interest and rent, and then the basic bills, and that's why I never claimed, for instance, for things like stamp duty or decorations or furniture or food or gardening or cleaning or any of those things. So I just wonder
whether others will think that this doesn't pass your own smell test.
Well, it's absolutely for others to make that decision. There's no new information in what's come out today. I've always been very clear about what I've claimed for and when I claim for it and all the rest of it. And I've always been very happy to explain my arrangements. As I say, I think that what is reasonable is things that are to do with having a second home, that are absolutely clear that that's the point to make. Because in my case, what I try and do is move my family all the time from Westminster to the constituency, so we stay together.
So over the past 3 weeks that this has been running, we've seen a number of MPs announcing that they're going to stand down at the next election. One of them, your former advisor, Andrew Mackay. I'm sure what makes a lot of people's blood boil is the idea that actually he stays on until the next election, that he's still got his MP salary, he'll still get the big payoff at the end of it, which you would get by staying on to then. Most people will say, well, hang on, if I've done something wrong, I'll be out of my ear.
Well, that's why I'd like a general election right now. I think the Prime Minister should set a date right now for either the end of July or maybe the beginning of September. And so we wouldn't have people that are announcing their retirement staying on for a long time as MPs. I think the problem, I'm in a constitutional convention, I suppose... Hang on. I suppose why not? But in the end, what the public want is they want to be part of the picture. They want to sit in judgment on MPs. They want to elect a new Parliament that will set the new rules, that will elect the new Speaker, that will make the new start. So that's why I say, have that general election now. And if we can't have an election now, then we should start looking, I agree, at recall powers and whatever. But much the best thing, call the general election, involve the public, let them have their say.
Well, OK, that's up to the Prime Minister to decide. What you have the power to say is to Andrew Mackay or Julie Kirkbride or, one or two of the others that have announced they're stepping down. Actually, I think in view of what you've done, it would be better if you actually forced a by-election now, so that let the people decide now, because it could be another year.
The powers that I have is to say to my MPs, if they have transgressed, to remove them from my front bench, which I've done in the case of Andrew Mackay, to force a retirement, which I did in the case of, say, Peter Viggers, and to say that everyone has to go in front of the scrutiny panel or I will take away the whip. And what I have to try and do is act in a way that is, yes, tough, yes, firm, but also consistent and fair. And that's what I've tried to do throughout, and that's what I'll continue to do. And that power of removing the whip, I think that is the key to making MPs take part in the scrutiny panel, which I think will result in a lot of people paying back quite a significant amount of money. Now, I know that's not enough, and I know people losing the whip isn't enough, and I know people retiring isn't enough, and that's why we need to have the general election.
Well,
that's why the public feels so cheated.
Well, let me ask you this. Would you welcome Mr Mackay, Julie Kirkbride, standing up and saying, the people should decide now, in our cases, there should be a by-election?
That any MP
I'm asking whether you'd welcome it.
I can't force that.
I know that. Yeah. I'm asking, would you welcome it?
Any MP who wants to do that, that would be their decision, and we would campaign in a by-election to elect a new Conservative Member of Parliament.
Would you welcome it?
Well, I think it's going to depend on the case. I mean, I'd much rather have a general election.
Andrew Mackay's case, would you welcome him having a by-election now in his Berkshire constituency?
It would be his decision. If he decided to do that, I'd back it. I'd put up a Conservative candidate. I'd fight. I'd go to Bracknell. I'd try and persuade people to vote Conservative. Yes, of course I would. But I want to focus...
but John, I think there's a point. I'm just trying to ask a straight question about whether... and I've asked it sort of 4 or 5 ways.
I think I've answered it. Is that if he wants to do that, I will get in there and campaign in a by-election.
Yes, you said if he wants to do it. What I'm trying to ask you is whether you would welcome it, so that the people have a chance to decide. Would you, David Cameron, welcome it?
If we can't have a general election, then we may have to have powers of recall, and that I would welcome a power of recall. I've said so. But much better for the country would be to have a general election where everyone has to get in front of their voters, rather than a rash of by-elections, which I think would actually kind of deflect from the need that everyone feels for a general election. So it's the general election I would welcome in favour of a by-election. OK,
let's ask about another MP, and this is about your Shadow Justice Minister, Eleanor Lang, who the papers report has made about £180,000 that should have been paid on capital gains tax on the sale of a property, which she, for the tax purposes, said one thing, for parliamentary allowances, said something apparently different. Is it acceptable for someone like that to be serving on your front bench?
Well, the scrutiny panel is going to be looking at every single case like that. They've made very good progress, and I'm very clear that if you were getting money for something as a second home, you can't then claim it's your first home for tax purposes. So that case will be dealt with, you'll see a result, and it'll be very clear for everyone to see.
So in the words of Gordon Brown over Hazel Blears, that is totally unacceptable?
Well, I don't think it's right to get money from the taxpayer for what you nominate as a second home and then to sell it and not pay capital gains tax. I put a stop to that immediately. Even before the House of Commons with my MPs, I said no more flipping of homes, no redesignation of homes first and second, and no one selling a second home and not paying capital gains tax. So I put that in place straight away. That applies from the future. For the past, we go through the scrutiny panel. If people have got it wrong, then money will have to be paid back. John Butterfield's another case, and I think we're addressing that one too.
So if it's not right, you do have you absolutely have the power, very simply, is who serves on your front bench. They serve
right. And in certain cases, people, as I say, in the case of Andrew Mackay, he left the front bench, and where appropriate, others will be removed from the front bench if they don't behave appropriately. I mean, I take each case, as I say, I want to be tough about this. I'm appalled, like everyone else is, by what has gone on. I recognise the public anger. I think I was quite quick to see, actually, just how bad this problem is, and I want to be very tough, but I also want to be consistent and fair, and that is what I will try and do throughout.
Let me try and get another definitive answer out of you. This is on fixed-term parliaments. You said you were attracted to the idea of it, and apparently people said you've been thinking about it for 3 years. Can't you just say, yes, there should be fixed-term parliaments, no, there shouldn't?
Well, there are two problems we have to address. One is the problem we've got right now, where someone says, Tony Blair, I'm going to serve a full term. Along comes a new Prime Minister, unelected after 2 years, and actually I think the country feels they've got an unelected Prime Minister, they were cheated in that way. So I think that is a problem. And there is a second problem, which we need to work through, which is if you've got a hung Parliament, a very weak government, do you want that to limp on over a 4 or 5 year cycle, rather than be able to have an early election? So what I said in that speech was a fixed-term Parliament when there's a clear majority. Perhaps that is the right way through. But as I say, I put forward a number of things to strengthen our Parliament, strengthen politics.
Can you just quickly say yes or no to fixed-term Parliament?
Well, I've given you a very full answer for how I think we ought to approach this. But I don't think anyone is going to be satisfied if we just suddenly say, oh, I know what, let's have PR, let's have fixed-term Parliaments. We've got to work through some of these issues, but above all, work through them after a general election in which the public has had their say.
I just want to ask you about one other issue.
Let me make actually one other point on restoring faith in politics, very briefly. Sticking to what we promised, having a referendum on the European Constitution, which everyone promised, that would do more for restoring trust and faith in Parliament and politicians than any number of quangos and conventions and all the rest of it. And if people want a referendum on the European Constitution, they should vote for it by voting Conservative on June the 4th.
I just want to ask you a very quick question about D-Day. Is it acceptable that the Queen is not going to represent the nation at the 65th anniversary?
Well, I don't want to involve the Queen in politics in any way, but what I would say is the government has made a complete mess of this right from the start. To start with, they didn't recognise the importance of the 65th anniversary of D-Day, so they've been too slow off the mark of planning what is an appropriate commemoration of what was, one of the most important days in the history of Western Europe. I was in Warsaw yesterday and met people who'd fought in the Warsaw Uprising in 1944 and talking about how they'd suffered and how much they want to commemorate it now because many of their comrades in arms, very few of them are left. And so it's really important we celebrate these things in a proper way.
David Cameron, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.